Jack. All right. You got the stuff?
Yeah. All cleaned in oil.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's get it on.
Who are these guys?
It's my theme music. Every good hero should have some.
Hot damn, it's time to get down to the jam. It's time to get down, it's time to get down, it's time to get down to the jam. I said it's time to get down to the knowledge, gonna get on down with the know. On the morning coffee show, on morning coffee with Keith, here on Pop Culture Minefield.
Excuse me, can I get a cup of coffee? Black?
Can't you see we talking? White?
Good morning, everyone. Wow. You know, when the decision was made to do all this, Camp Keith, you know, I wasn't sure what the reaction was going to be. And I got to say, wow, you know, there are a lot of people that seem to really be, you know, responding to this. So I hope that what we're able to provide will be up to what you expect, or at least hope to see us do and accomplish. Hello, Andy Morrow and Anima Confusa. Hey, Mrs. A. Good morning, you too. Wow. Well, looks like today we are going to finish out the 1970s by examining 1977 to 1979. Now, look, I get it. What we did last week, what we're doing this week, it doesn't work out. You know, we should be starting with 76 to 79. But I made this division here because when it comes to the 1970s, especially those of us that lived through it, there is what the entertainment industry was before May 25th, 1977, and after May 25th, 1977. And that's just the way it is. You know, the industry, definitely with fandom, there were a lot of things that we didn't get to easily. That we could have, if I'd been a little bit better writing out my notes. Maybe if I decide to do this again, we can get more in depth with that time period. But it doesn't change the fact that 1977 began something entirely different. And Ben is here. Ben, I got to get you that link, my man. Let's see, maybe Martin can do that for you here. But
yeah, I don't have how his contact info. Right? I don't have how to send the link.
Oh, well then let me get on that then. But yeah, I will say this. In leaving behind 1976, there was, you know, a lot of those films, especially Logan's Run. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what Hollywood thought. That is the studio version of science fiction. Very, it has a very 70s vibe to it. When you look at a lot of the films from the early part of the decade, especially a lot of the Chuck Heston films, and then other films. Hello, Gambit, 1987. You have a particular point of view and a way of seeing things, and it is obvious once you get to May 25th, 1977, that there is a different look and a different vibe about all of it. And I just, it really isn't, it's not something that could easily be replicated, as much as many tried. When Star Wars came out, there were a lot of people who tried to replicate that and couldn't get it, for various reasons. But I think with all of the books that have been written about this, about the production of Star Wars, I think the one thing that anyone can say about Star Wars is that it was most definitively a passion project. Lucas was a man who knew exactly what he wanted. And having a problem here. My computer just went a different place. Hold on.
There's a lot of that happening.
Yeah, my screen just went out.
Oops.
Wow.
Well, we can still hear you at least. And
Yeah.
if it's any consolation, we have Ben here.
Hey!
Good morning, peeps. Okay, so today's fit in honor of 1977 is Star Wars.
Of course. That is look, Star Wars is the dominant movie of that decade. There is no other film that comes close because of the power and the impact of that one film. That isn't to say that there weren't other movies that were incredible coming out. You still had Jaws. You still had Close Encounters, both of which are Spielberg films. But outside of Spielberg and Lucas, it was like nobody else really got the memo, about how things had progressed in terms of subject matter and in terms of really technology. I think something like Logan's Run really would have been different if it had been made and released 2 years later, 1978.
Right.
Although looking at some of the films that were put into production and released in the shadow of Star Wars, like something like Star Crash. Now that was actually in production while Star Wars, I think, was in production. And my screen returned. Thank goodness. But Star Crash was an Italian science fiction film with David Hasselhoff, and that film had its own sort of. That film is very much tied to that decade, like Logan's Run It is a very 70s type of film, and in many ways, so was Glenn A. Larson's upcoming adaptation of Buck Rogers. It has a very
I remember
70s
that.
feel to it. But you know, that's the reason why Star Wars feels so different. You know, George Lucas was actually pulling from several different sources in order to create it, and then had a unique look about the whole thing. Let's see, hold on. Gambit says, yeah, it launched the careers of Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, James Earl Jones, and more. Okay, not quite. Harrison Ford had actually been acting before. He was actually someone who had was one of the last generation of actors to actually go through the Hollywood system.
Mhm. He had been in another Lucas feature before that.
Yes. In fact, he actually was in American Graffiti
Precisely.
as Bob Ralpha. But and that's coming back after everything else. He had actually had a career years before, and his first movie, his first credit was appearing as a bellhop in a James Colburn movie, and they tried to set him up with different things, and it just didn't work out. You know, again, that old Hollywood system basically was dead by 1969, and Harrison Ford, from all of that, had to get a real job, but also kept acting. You know, he had appeared in a lot of different things. I know he did 2 episodes of Kung Fu and various other programs. I think he had also done 2 episodes of Gunsmoke.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was already someone who was known. Carrie Fisher, you should just take her right off that list anyway. She's a legacy. Okay? She's second generation Hollywood. She was born into acting. She had already appeared in the movie Shampoo. And I personally like to think that she would have been, quote unquote, discovered in whatever movie, even if Star Wars had not, even if she had not been cast, she would have eventually made it after the appearance that she had in the movie Shampoo. I think she would have made it one way or another. Mark Hamill was already, he had already had made an appearance, I think he was hoping to, I think he either, trying to remember based on an interview he gave, I think he had already appeared in a soap opera and had done voices, a few voices for some Saturday morning cartoons, one of which is the I Dream of Jeannie Saturday morning cartoon called Jeannie.
He had also been in a sitcom prior to that called The Texas Wheelers. Short-lived sitcoms.
Yes. In fact, the last thing I remember seeing him in prior to, there were 2 things I remember seeing him in prior to Star Wars. He had done an episode of The Bill Cosby Show.
Mm-hmm.
And he had also done, let's see, the last thing was an episode of The Partridge Family. And that's the last thing I remember before he starred in the movie. Oh, Real Popcorn Geek. Hey, giving us the bad news. Well, for some of us, it could not have come soon enough.
Well, is that show really 4 years old?
Yeah. Well, look. let me just step out of what we're doing with Camp Keith for a moment to comment on this. For those who have not been paying attention, let me at least alert you to something. I think I've said it on this show before, and I'm going to repeat it. Skydance and its boss have made no real secret about their displeasure for the current state of Star Trek. Now, I know there are some of you out there that are fans of it, and God be with you, you know, but for some of us who actually, you know, like our Star Trek to be a little more on the well-written side, this has been torturous at best. There is no way to even keep parts of this. Based on what I have learned, the way Kurtzman's contract is, it's kind of like it's like the beginning of the third act to Captain America: The Winter Soldier, when Steve basically has to reveal that you can't keep parts of S.H.I.E.L.D. It all has to go. It's all been infected. So all of it has to go. You can't keep just one part of it. It all has to go. Discovery, Strange New Worlds, all of it. Anything that has been, like in Babylon 5, anything that's been touched by the shadows, and in this case, it's in this case, it's Alex Kurtzman and Akiva Goldsman. Anything that they've touched, it has to go. Because they don't want to have to pay. They do not want to have to pay Kurtzman and his people money for even using parts of this. So they're not going to try to buy him out. They've offered, I heard. He doesn't want that deal. Something tells me he wants a whole lot more money, and it's not worth it. So the long national nightmare under New Trek is basically it does have an endpoint. And while there are some of you that seem for some reason to enjoy the Kurtzman version of Starship Regulars, which was a much better concept for animation, and also had Michael Dorn as a voice in it, I know there are some of you out there that think it's the bee's knees. Doesn't matter what any of us think or say, it all goes. It all has to go. But and it still may even have to take some time off. They still may just go ahead and wait a few years before they launch anything else. As of right now, the contract basically states that when we get to that point where things are going to change, whatever is officially in production has to be allowed to be completed. And basically, they're just going to try to rush to get as much stuff done as possible, so they can get everything. They can clear the deck and just get rid of all this at one time. As a book reader, I'm happy to say that we can now go back to pocket books and undo the mess that was done that I really hated that they did. For those of you who don't read pocket books, one of the things that really ticked off a lot of us real Trek fans is that they decided to take certain books that had been written and alter them to fit the new milieu. So certain books, certain biographies of certain characters have been altered slightly to fit the characters and storylines of Kurtzman Trek. And so if Kurtzman Trek is going out, that means pocket books can go back to actually printing the real versions of these stories and get rid of this claptrap, which I am not sad to see go. We've done this dance as as a whole, as a fan base, the way it was prior to even 2009, as a whole, this has been an unmitigated failure. Because in order for New Trek to have survived, you needed to be pulling the numbers that you were doing pre-2009. And they weren't doing that. And what a lot of Kurtzman Trek fans didn't seem to understand is insulting fans to get them to watch your show wasn't working. You weren't selling the merchandise. Nobody was watching the show. This has to go. From a business standpoint, it has to go. So I'm not going to cry any tears about it. I'm sad to see all these actors have to move on, because I believe that everybody, all the actors they have are really talented people. I'd like to see them in it. But it's just time to move on to something that people actually want to watch. So,
well, I mean, that being said, I didn't like Discovery, all that much, but I am enjoying, Strange New Worlds. Just like I enjoyed Enterprise, especially after the second season. There is, because of the ones that have come out recently, Strange New Worlds is the one that feels closest to Trek. So
that's the Akiva Goldsman effect.
Mm-hmm.
Akiva Goldsman has this parasitic-like ability to be able to glom onto something. Mm-hmm. My whole thing with Strange New Worlds is this: you get starved of what Trek actually is. Mm-hmm. So that basically something that simulates what Star Trek actually is seems like it's better than it actually is. I love Ethan Peck as a performer, but I think the way that they have written for his character is just insulting.
What?
I like.
You don't like it? I like science.
That's Discovery, dude.
Same.
With Spock on Strange New Worlds, it's all about how can we push the boundaries of him acting human. How many different ways can they play that card out? How many different ways can we change characters and storylines and still bold-face, I don't want to use the word lie, but gaslight fans and telling them, but this is the official Star Trek timeline now. Everything we do on this show is official. It's like, no, it's not. You guys are changing things. If you weren't, what happened to Dr. Piper? Don't hear about Dr. Piper. What happened to, there's all kinds of stuff that they've done. And I've said it since the beginning. If they really wanted to make Strange New Worlds a successful show, there's two things they could do right now that would change the fortunes of that show. One, separate it from everything and say it's an alternate universe. That right there might get you 1/3 of the people who don't tune in. Automatically. Because it frees up fans, but it also frees up the writers. Because even with Discovery, the thing that they hated was the Prime Directive. That's according to Goldsman himself. And so if you don't like the Prime Directive, you're not really writing Star Trek too much. That I just have a problem with that. That's a part of what Star Trek is. With Enterprise, I think that was one of the things that I think that was really one of the things that they were warned about in going backwards. And I have to agree. It's dumb to go backwards in time with Star Trek. You should always be moving forward. Discovery should not have been a backward show. It should have always been a show that should have taken place 20 years after the events of Nemesis. You know, it should have always been that. Don't go giving Spock a new half sister that you now have to retcon why you never heard about her. And your retcon is more about it's a bunch of people keeping a secret. It's like, that's dumb. Because many of the people you're talking about aren't Vulcan that have to keep the secret.
And humans are terrible at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you know that being of course, you know, Star Trek. 1977, where we start, is where Star Wars takes over the landscape.
Yeah. Yes.
And you know, and I think one of the things that was revolutionary about Star Wars was that the special effects were not cheesy.
Yes.
You know, by comparison, at the time, you could not tell, you know, that these were I mean, Lucas put so much attention to detail by comparison, you know, in that time, to what I was used to as a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old going into 10 and my 10th year, you know, so sophisticated as I was. But Star Wars, one of the reasons it changed the whole face of everything, there were two things I think that really addressed what was going on. One, you know, was the effects. The special effects were amazing for their time, and they were practical effects. They weren't. Lucas wasn't taking some new technology and doing something completely new with it. He was taking current proven technology and using it, to my 9-year-old head, in completely new ways. But also Lucas did one thing that no sci-fi movie really mastered, and that was the storytelling was based on Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces. As a writer, one of the things I look at is story structure. And one of the things that comes up in story structure all the time is the hero's journey. And Star Wars is a textbook example of the hero's journey. I mean, you have everything almost to the letter, including the magic sword, the freaking lightsaber. You have the you have the mentor, you know, you have the literal journey through death, you know, into the underworld, the Death Star, you know, coming out heroes. I mean, you have everything just like nailed, you know. Lucas took a hammer and nailed every story beat. And those are things that I think were vital to the whole idea behind Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that I think that is part of what did he treated it, you know, it's like was it the difference between Tim Curry and in the Muppet movies, Tim Curry, you know, is the only human and acts like a Muppet. And I can't remember who it is that was in the other one, and you know, basically treats it like it's good acting. You know, granted, Lucas can't write dialogue to save his damn life, but
you know, it was definitely different. What the landscape was prior to Star Wars. And in my opinion, it wasn't just the visual effects. I mean, it was really everything that Lucas and his people were doing was making a real difference, especially for the amount of money that they actually made that film for. That's the other thing. When you look at a lot of these films that came out, they are comparatively cheap.
Yeah.
You know, compared to a lot of the expense and what it costs to make films now. As a contrast, to that.
Mhm.
You still had other films that played within the science fiction or at least extreme fantasy route. The movie Capricorn 1 was, for those of us that are more about conspiracy theories,
Right.
but it's still a very good thriller and kind of a sci-fi movie of its own right.
Right.
You have let's see, so we're talking 1977, so you still had animated films like Wizards.
Yes.
Wizards was, that film came out, and that should be talked about because Mark Hamill is a voice in that film. He did his work on Wizards. He's one of the characters in the animated film Wizards.
Oh, God. And
Yeah.
here's the thing. I've been a fan of that film for a long time, but only after that when I actually got out into the world, and again wasn't part of the 50s. But yeah, the Wizards, I did not know Mark Hamill was in Wizards. Jeez.
Yep. Then you have Damnation Alley, which you've actually covered on Pop Culture Minefield before.
Love that one.
Yeah, I know. It's a again, you still had quite a few films. The aforementioned movie Star Crash, about an alien. It's about a smuggler and an alien companion who's with her, and they're recruited by the Emperor of the Galaxy to protect Earth from the evil Count Zarth Arn. So,
yeah, because in pre-77 films, all your villains had a Z or an X in the name. It seems like.
Yep, Christopher Plummer, Marjoe Gordner, David Hasselhoff, Caroline Munro. Who played Stella Star?
Stella Star.
70s, gotta love them, kids.
Right?
And of course, Close Encounters, which also came out in 77.
Right? Yeah, Close Encounters was, and also, honorable mention in 77, The Spy Who Loved Me, which was Roger Moore's third Bond film. So when 007 developed a sense of humor, and and it led into a lot of things after that. It just made so many things possible. But the thing about Star Wars is, in looking at its impact, you're looking at, for instance, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That year made about half, a little more than half of what Star Wars did. Like 116 to 125 to 130 million, or 220 some odd million, that year. And one of the other things that Lucas did, that was, I think, brilliant on his part, because as a kid, this impacted me directly, is merchandise.
Yes.
The merchandise.
Well, and that was only possible because Fox had gotten burned on the Planet of the Apes merchandise. That's really what did it. Fox got burned badly on Planet of the Apes. So bad that when Lucas was negotiating, he was able to just take the rights. He took all the merchandising rights. And that right there really was a majority of what made him wealthy, was the merchandising money. Fox kept the rights to the film. And because Lucas got the merchandising, that afforded him the ability to be able to afford to support the next film, which was The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. which
And
also changed changed the face of movie going. But it's,
yes,
I mean, but yeah, because here was the thing that with Star Wars is that the Star Wars merchandising again, and this is looking at it solely as someone who was impacted by it. With Star Wars, with the action figures and things like that, the kids could become part of the story.
yes,
Because as a kid, I remember playing out in my backyard with all my action figures, utterly destroying any possible collector's value of them. But back then, collecting action figures was not really, that established as among mainstream fandom.
and actually, collecting even action figures became different after Star Wars. Pre-Star
Precisely.
Wars, action figures for many kids, especially boys, were big.
Yeah, there were the
Star
12-inch. Yeah.
Yeah, the Kenner contract shrunk those figures, and I think, man, that was a company out of Ohio. Man, Ohio had a lot of things going on in the 70s. No, seriously. I mean, they had Hanna-Barbera. They had okay, if I remember correctly, a lot of you can back me up because you're fans of the toys that made us from and they did a whole thing about Star Wars. And if I remember correctly, that company was on the edge of going bankrupt before they got the Star Wars contract.
Yeah.
And so they were they were a toy company out of Cincinnati.
Right.
And they were on the edge of going bankrupt before they got the license to do that. And wow. Just wow. But I know it's limited, but I mean there again, it really is hard to express how important Star Wars was to the entire landscape of entertainment. Because once that film hit, it literally is a night and day type thing. It's like looking at satellite photographs, before a volcano erupts versus after. Like with Mount St. Helens, when you look at the footage from the area the day before the eruption, and then look at it the day after the eruption. It's kind of like that. The entire entertainment landscape, everybody wanted a piece of that. If there was any way that you could fit Star Wars within something that you were doing, they did it. And oh wow.
And also, Star Wars did not get a lot of pre-release, marketing, and so they were really, really like, I think they marketed it at Comic-Con or something like that.
There were a few conventions that they did do that at. You even had a couple of people representing Fox and Lucasfilm that actually went to a couple conventions and tried to drum up some support. But again, it's just once that film got released and once the general public saw it, wow. I mean, that's it's just amazing that the whole those multiple packs of trading cards, I think for me it was the big Star Wars issue from People magazine that they did, which was just every article was all Star Wars related. Interviews with anybody that ever had contact with anybody that had anything to ever do with that movie. They put all kinds of stuff in that issue. And for those too young, People magazine was a very, very, very popular, I think it was a weekly or monthly magazine. I think it was a weekly almost. It was just a very, very popular magazine. And to make the cover of People rank right up there with pretty much making the cover of Time magazine,
Mm-hmm.
It was just it was a unique honor, and I think Star Wars took the cover of every major magazine in existence when that film came out.
Right. And and the other thing that really I think stood out to me, again, as a 9-year-old, not as an expert, as a 9-year-old, was the casual references to this established history. You know, for instance, the sequence with with R2-D2 projecting Princess Leia, talking about General Kenobi fighting, served her father during the Clone Wars, which that throwaway line.
Yeah. That's a master class in really seeding and getting a lot of things out there without really discussing too much. But it's a way of being able to manipulate your audience in such a way, especially for little kids, to get their minds just rolling.
Right. Oh, yeah, no. So let me tell you this, though. As a writer, here's what I think goes through Lucas's mind 30 years later. He did not, he probably had that in his head, but going back and revisiting that in depth, because Lucas is going, okay, so he fought in these wars, because bear in mind, the Star Wars as it came out was very different from Star Wars as Lucas originally conceived it, because the main character was not Luke Skywalker. It was Star Killer, and Lucas goes back, and this is why I think that Lucas went back and goes, let's see what we can do with this. Oh, look, the Clone Wars, we mentioned that. What was that? Originally Skywalker's name was Star Killer. And later on, Lucas goes and creates a new character, or the Star Wars franchise goes and creates a new character named Star Killer, that is completely different from the grizzled general that we were, I think, supposed to see in the first place.
Yeah. But once you get to where Star Wars now has affected entertainment, and you start seeing all the different ways that it has, you go into 1978, and already you have a remake of a classic film that in and of itself has become kind of a classic itself, and that's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And this version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers did a very good job of scaring everybody.
Guys, before we go into that, we have to acknowledge that Andy Morrow has gifted 5 Pop Culture Minefield memberships.
What?
Thank you, Andy. Oh, yeah.
Andy!
And the winners
Wow,
are
dude.
Lord Thoth, Outlaw Bill, Josh Herkamp. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Parrothead, and Horror with Nats, also known as Nadia.
Happy to have you all. Wow. Well, look, do we have something to play for them, or?
Let me see if we.
Well, the lovely Anima. There you go. See, isn't it enough just to be thanked by her because she's cool like that?
I would say we can express our thanks to Andy Morrow with this one.
For that, you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Wait. Man, his bedside manner is incredible. But with Invasion of the Body Snatchers, solid cast. Donald Sutherland, Brooke Adams, Jeff Goldblum, Veronica Cartwright. You know, I just
Oh,
me.
is that who I think it is?
Where is what we think it is?
Oh well, who I heard in the background?
What are you hearing?
Oh well, forget about it.
Okay.
So the only thing I have in the background on my side is a cat trying to yak up a hairball, but that's what I get for having long-haired cats. But anyways, go ahead.
No, as I was saying, the film also featured Leonard Nimoy in an exceedingly creepy role. And of course, a cameo appearance by the great Kevin McCarthy, who was actually the lead of the original movie that this is based on. And wow, just the ending of that movie is just, whew. If you've never seen it, you need to check it out. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Wow. It'll rightfully it'll freak you out. But then we have let's see, also in 1978
we have Superman.
That's what I was going to say. Richard Donner's Superman came out, and that's a film that definitely benefited from having John Williams and the London Symphony Orchestra perform on that track, because they had also had worked on Star Wars. I mean, it had gotten to the point where for a lot of people, you weren't used to seeing John Williams' name unless it was with the London Symphony Orchestra, you know? And for many people who hadn't been paying attention, didn't really realize that John Williams started out as a guy who did music for a lot of different TV shows and some early work by Spielberg. But he was mainly doing stuff like he's the one that created the catchier danceable theme for Lost in Space. The more hip theme version. That's Johnny Williams, as he was known back then. Johnny Williams. But the thing about Superman was, as I've explained before, is that you had this really cool IP, but you had producers that had no real idea who the character was. And so their original idea for making a Superman movie is pretty much to have just, the entire thing would have been very, very much a 70s type of project. That when you hear their pitch, there is no real difference between having them do what they did on the big screen or having something that could have been presented on TV as sort of a goof. They were going to use it as sort of like this thing that they did that was supposed to have a lot of celebrities of that time period cameos salted throughout the entire story. And again, it just became apparent that these guys really had no earthly idea who or what Superman truly was.
Right.
And what it meant to people who actually grew up reading the comics, watching the animated stuff, and had it not been for Richard Donner and Tom Mankiewicz, we wouldn't even really be talking about this movie.
True.
Just the job they did.
And Donner, in a director sense, they got Christopher Reeve. They got the most they could out of Reeve.
Yeah.
Because his version, I mean, there for years, everybody who said, "Oh, Superman's disguise is just a pair of glasses," no. And I always point to the scene where Lois Lane and is supposed to go out with Clark Kent, and Superman shows up.
Yeah.
And that moment after the interview where Reeves walks in,
Superman flies away. Yeah,
Superman flies away. Clark comes in as Clark Kent, and you've got that comparison, that first comparison in your head, and then he contemplates telling her about it. And he takes the glasses off and stands up, and you're going, "Oh my God, that really is the same guy." He did a masterful job of portraying the difference between Clark Kent and Superman.
Yeah. That is fantastic. I mean, but then again, you had to have an actor who was going to bring it like that because of all the other talent that you had in the movie.
Yeah.
That was a film that had a lot of talent in it. And
Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor.
Oh, geez. I mean, just everybody in that cast was first rate. I can't even just sit here and just like, wow, it's hard to think of a film that was more loaded down with just incredible cameos. And on top of that, to have Donner go ahead and decide to have a cameo by the first actor and first actress to ever play Superman and Lois on film. To have them in that film was just, oh, wow. Just really, really cool. I've always enjoyed that movie. It's a very well-written film.
Yeah. The only thing that later on I look at and go, damn, I wish I hadn't done that, was making Lex Luthor kind of a comedic role.
Yeah.
And which is problematic as, certain things about the character, about the actors, personal life may become later on. Kevin Spacey did a good job of reinventing the cinematic version. But even still, it was, I think, still a product that film was, that Luthor was still a product of the 70s.
Yeah.
You couldn't have the villain be someone that you were, in a heroic film, be someone that you took seriously. Not until
he had to be a little over the top.
Oh yeah.
You were going up against a guy who could fly.
Exactly. And which led the way to Superman 2, which is entirely different setup. But yeah, 78 also sees on television Battlestar Galactica, as you mentioned before, Buck Rogers, which was great in the first season and not so hot in the second. You had so much going out there, but that year in films, your top films weren't sci-fi because I don't think anything could really compete. You had, you had Superman, which was the closest, but everything else was, was back to the same grind.
Well, it takes a while. It really does take a while. You also have to remember 1978 was also the year that you had the animated Lord of the Rings.
True. Bakshi is like at his best, or at his height of fame around that time. So yeah. I mean, yeah, it took time, but it also, you've got Star Wars out there. You've got Battlestar Galactica. They're trying to branch out into TV.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing there.
Well, I mean, but here's the other thing. The reason why I didn't immediately go into the whole Battlestar Galactica thing is that the idea for Battlestar Galactica goes all the way back to about 1967. Glenn A. Larson had been working on an idea, and that idea eventually turned into Battlestar Galactica. It's talked about in the documentary about Battlestar Galactica. And so what Star Wars did was it put together an interest in doing something big. And also with Larson being able to hire away some of Lucas's talent, it gave them access to people who know or knew how to manipulate the visual effects, that it was very reminiscent of what you would expected or what you had known from Star Wars, but at the same time was different. So it's still very good, and I still enjoy every so often watching the original pilot to that. But wow, I just can't. Oh man, I just can't. Again, with what we've covered up to this point, that's a lot of genre there, way more than what most people have assumed there would be at this time of the year. And again, this is we've only gotten to 1978. You know, this is 77 to 78 with what has been released up to now. I think I seem to remember something else. Oh man, I just lost it. Anyway, no, that happens a lot. Trust me.
No, I hear you.
Getting old sucks. But 1979, and we start off with Time After Time.
Another Christopher Reeve, yeah.
No.
No, Time After Time. Sorry, no, that's it's a different one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's the what I'm talking about is Time After Time, starring Malcolm McDowell and David Warner, Mary Steenburgen, Andrea Katsouras. But it's Malcolm McDowell plays H.G. Wells, and he and his best friend, played by David Warner, would often get together, discuss, any manner of subject matter, and eventually H.G. Wells gets excited to show his friend this invention that he has, and his friend ends up stealing it. And it turns out his friend is actually Jack the Ripper, and H.G. Wells has to go to the future to stop his friend from continuing to kill women, and to get him to just give up and come back to their proper time period. So it's a very well done film. This was the movie that Malcolm McDowell first met Mary Steenburgen, and they would eventually get married. If I remember correctly, it was and this was the movie that was also this was based on a novel of the same name, but it was actually directed by Nicholas Meyer, who would go on to become the director of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. And again, if you've never seen this film, you need to check it out. It is very well done. This is, I think this is part of what it was like, as for Malcolm McDowell. in the 1970s to have began it with A Clockwork Orange and then to be ending the decade for him with Time After Time. Both of them very effective movies with fascinating directors attached to both. That's what makes Malcolm McDowell, in my opinion, the guy. You know, but have you ever seen Time After Time?
As a kid, yes, but that was also as a kid. I remember, I remember vague snatches of it, like, fight in the hotel room, exchanging the banknotes, things like that. Little snatches of it. I don't remember a lot of the actual plot. Star Wars was one of the few movies that actually engaged me. Time After Time was something my parents took me to see. Weirdly enough,
Yeah.
Well,
I can definitely tell you that when I first saw that movie, I was David Warner was very good at scaring the stuffing out of me. I can definitely say I became a very, very big fan of David Warner because he's one of the few that could actually be scary in one role, and then you could turn around and he be someone who could be gentle and knowledgeable, and he could play all different types.
Mm-hmm.
I still think I have a tie for the two best characters he's ever played between Dillinger
Mm-hmm.
from Tron and Evil from Time Bandits.
Oh God, yes. Tell me about microwave ovens.
Yes, you're right, Tom Baker. David was British, classy, and talented. I mean, the guy was just... He's one of the few actors that I think was able to appear in one Star Trek movie and then make an appearance in the very next Star Trek movie playing a completely different character. In fact, he had appeared in two classic Trek movies back to back, playing two different characters, and then went on to make a cameo, really to act in a pivotal episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, opposite Patrick Stewart, playing a Cardassian. Tell me, how many lights do you see? That's David Warner.
Yes. Oh God. That is a classic one. Yes. And here's the thing. I think that really threw me off with Time After Time, because prior to that, my primary encounter or experience is what I'm looking for with Malcolm McDowell, was from watching A Clockwork Orange on HBO. McDowell scared the crap out of me in every other film after that.
Wow.
Because him in A Clockwork Orange, he was one scary character, and in spite of everything that happens to him in the film, he just scared me. But yeah, and looking at 1979, in terms of what else happens, this is the year that we get both Star Trek: The Motion Picture and Alien.
Yeah, two films, completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both films aren't truly appreciated for what they were able to do. Again, we're living in the post Star Wars era now. Star Wars has changed entertainment. And yet I think Alien was a film that was made. I don't think the budget was that big. It was mainly about scaring the blank out of people.
Yeah, I mean it was only like what it was under 20 million.
Yeah. And I think it got nominated for an Academy Award or two. So I think that I think that was the thing with Alien is that just like what George Lucas had done, Ridley Scott and his team had a different way of presenting technology. And while everybody else was trying to copy what Star Wars had done, with Alien, it was a different thing. You know, they had to go a different direction. And in my opinion, and again, I'm not trying to make light of Alien at all. I really respect what they had done. But for me, it was always really just a science fiction version of a slasher movie. You know?
Yeah, it really was. It was a horror film.
Yeah.
In space. But
in
again,
space.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at its tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream," you know, it was. But I think also Alien did something that, aside from scaring the bejesus out of me and my stepdad, which was hard to do, yeah, he was a horror film fan, and I think the thing that Alien did was we never really got a chance to see the bad guy. You know, it did most of its work in your imagination. But the other thing it did that I think was just amazing, one was the size of like the ship, the Sulaco. It was freaking massive. And they did a really good job of making it feel that way. It felt organic. It looked like something you'd see that, you know, that the U.S. Navy or would create, or something like that. But then you get Giger's version of the ship and the pods and the alien itself, and it just all looks so techno-organic.
Wow. Yeah. It was. Wow. That's just. That just takes me back. You know, I mean, just that film was just. You definitely have to be able to take it. You know, that is not one of those films that you can easily watch by yourself.
No.
You know? Yeah. And I think that's exactly what they were going for. You know, you literally need someone else to be there with you in that room while you're watching that movie. But then turn it on its head and create a lot of paranoia with your audience.
Yeah. Well, and Alien did something else too. Yes, 11 Alpha, I agree with you on on Aliens, and but Alien did something else too, in that while Ripley could have been the final girl, in a lot of senses, I was watching something the other night, and I can't remember what it was, or actually my girlfriend was watching something the other night, and there was the idea that sometimes the final girl basically makes it just simply because she knows when to hide. The final girl makes it because she is a freaking coward. In Alien, Ripley takes agency. She becomes the seed of the Ripley we see in Aliens, who teaches Marines how to fight. But
that's true.
But Ripley also on the one hand knows when to hide, but she also knows when to fight. you know, and she's the smart one, um, you know, in that whole group. She's the smartest one, but that doesn't. But the alien makes it clear being smart is not the only thing that's going to save you. It takes a measure of luck.
Yeah.
You know, it's gonna take a measure of luck to save your ass, which it does. Which leads us into Aliens, which is a different approach, which is a full on action movie. But then we have Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Oh my God. As a 12 at this point, 11 or 12, I fell in love with the whole new look of the Enterprise, the whole, the new uniforms. Everything was new and old at the same time.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Just flooding back all these memories.
Right.
All these films.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just like, and again, we can't forget the television shows too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I
talked about Quark the last episode, but
mm-hmm.
it's Battlestar Galactica. While it only did last one season, was still very groundbreaking and influential. Anthony Stewart having,
Mm-hmm.
Just wow.
Yeah.
I feel bad for a lot of you out there that never got a chance to experience this in the 70s, because it just it was like the starter pistol just went off and everybody was making a run. I mean, just wow.
And some of them weren't great. Were not great, I mean, see, you're 1978 in television. Jeez. American television. So that's the year we also get Fantasy Island.
Yes. Now, let me at least say this, to jump back to Malcolm McDowell for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm McDowell did several other films, I think, but for me,
mm-hmm.
and I think I said this in the last show, for me, Clockwork Orange, I have to admit, messed me up. I mean, I can't lie. That film did mess me up.
Right.
It was the torture scene that got me.
Mm-hmm.
I had watched the torture scene, and I know, it was just like, there's just so much, and
mm-hmm.
and it's hard to. Well, it's not hard, but I mean, it really does say something about this particular period,
mm-hmm.
77 to 79.
Right.
You get all of this stuff just coming right at you. And if you're a science fiction fan,
mm-hmm.
it really is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Disney's The Black Hole came out in 79.
Oh God, yeah, and the Black Hole at the time was Disney. I mean, weirdly enough, my nearest comparison, Black Hole, was the Event Horizon of
mm-hmm.
Up until Event Horizon came out. Because it was frankly scary.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had all the elements, same elements as Alien. Your protagonists are far from help, in a remote region of space on a very big spacecraft with an enemy they can't really defeat. Watching Max, the evil robot, just basically saw through a guy, was like, yeah.
Oh, I tell you,
mm-hmm.
it is just Oh, wait a minute. What is Real Popcorn Geek saying again?
What is he saying?
David Warner was Dean Kane's Jor-El. Really?
Really?
Wow.
That's
okay. Well, that knocked me over.
right. God. So, also one that I remember from that time, Project UFO. Basically was Project Blue Book, and they didn't always explain it away. That was, I think that was the first year we saw the Amazing Spider-Man on television.
Well,
but the live action ones.
Yeah. I have said this before on my show. I think it bears repeating. I really do believe that Disney could get away with remaking The Black Hole. They just have to be smart about it. But I mean, knowing what they now know.
Don't do it. Don't do it. That movie is perfect, just how it is.
I think the Black Hole could, now that Keith mentions it, I'd never thought of remaking it, but I would have to say it is one that could be remade simply because you have better effects, and I think you could get a little bit more mature writing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it. They're gonna ruin Maximilian. They're gonna ruin Maximilian.
I think nowadays we could come up with a robot that's even more fearsome. And
nobody's more intimidating than Maximilian.
I know.
Even a T-800 would think twice before taking on Maximilian. That bitch has gone through hell.
But I mean, up until then too, we still had, bordering on science fiction. We had the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman running up to this point. Quark, I remember you mentioning that. Didn't that end in 78, 79, or was that earlier?
Yeah, somewhere around there, yeah.
You look it up. 77, okay. And then what else do we have here? I'm just doing a quick search for for what was going on that year. Yeah, Quark ended in 77. $6 Million Man. Oh, dude, the Carol Burnett Show ended that year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we had a lot going on that year, in 77 or 78. Yeah, in 78. Because we had Battlestar Galactica. Huh?
Well, I thought we were on 1979 now. 79?
Okay, so 79. Let's take a look at what we had going on that year. Because 78 was when we had, looking at what starts in 79. Is one that I thought was hilarious, and I was so sad that it was only one season. Salvage One.
Yes, with Andy Griffith.
Andy Griffith, that's right. Oh, that was, and that was. I loved the whole, the whole concept behind that, And
I hadn't thought about that movie in a long time.
Right. Wow. Right. Wow. Yeah. That was an interesting interesting concept, because he builds a rocket that was intended to salvage the moon landings, and then commences shenanigans.
Yeah.
And right.
I'm just shaking my head going, wow, how did I ever forget that movie?
Right. Or it was it was a 16 episode series. Yeah. 79 is also when we start to see the Dukes of Hazzard.
Oh.
Right. That's 8 seasons of, but it's also when we see Super Train. Just looking at that one. What else we got?
Let's see.
But in terms of are we wanting to stick with with sci-fi? Because let's see what we got here. Just looking at some of these.
Well, I mean, again, what the effect that all of this had on TV was immediate.
Mm-hmm.
I think TV did a better job of embracing a lot of these newer faces. Okay.
Let's see here.
So,
because this is where we start to see Buck Rogers. Yeah.
Yes. Buck Rogers is Gil Gerard.
Mm-hmm.
And, basically, it's the character of Buck who goes to sleep in the I think it's the 31st century, or is it 21st century?
25th century is when he wakes up.
Okay, 25th century.
Yes, because that's literally the title, Buck Rogers in the 25th century, which is based on, oh my God, Buck Rogers was based on, the original Buck Rogers. Hang on.
Hold on. Let me. This other screen's not coming up. See? Technical issues. Oh, sorry, 11 Alpha. Wow.
1928. Oh my God. So the original Buck Rogers goes from 1929 to 1967 in a comic strip, but also is in radio and things like that. I think he was even in, there were several films, movie serials, things like that. And then we get 1978 version of Buck Rogers, which was like the single most egregious use of spandex. I mean, everybody wore spandex in the 25th century, no matter what they were doing.
I just wow. It's just like all of this just got. I mean, when I was going over all of this stuff for this show, it's hitting me how long this has been, and just how many of these films I've actually watched.
Right.
But wow.
Yeah. So one thing about the Buck Rogers show that sticks, the 79 is that the opening sequence was trippy. And I think, as I recall, originally had lyrics. At least the television film did. But that opening sequence was like, they were trying to be freaking James Bond in the original one. Yeah, Suspension actually had lyrics. And then they used the instrumental for that for the scene, for the opening later on. Yeah, because I remember going back and watching the original film as an adult. Hits so different than it did as a kid. I was just, of course, as a kid, the holiday special was cool. Now I'm going, oh my God, that was a travesty. But yeah, as a kid, I remember watching that and just wanting to be Buck Rogers. I actually built the model of the Starfighter that they used.
Oh man, I want that model. The Star Raider. That's the one that got away.
Yeah, because I mean that was, oh man, yeah, that was incredible. And the thing is that as a kid, I didn't realize that they were basically just reusing stock footage, both in Battlestar Galactica and in Buck Rogers.
Oh, Battlestar Galactica reused a lot of the fighter sequence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And the Thunder Fighter.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, I remember putting that thing together and having to glue parts back on because I dropped it so many times. But yeah, I mean,
here, let me at least put also this other part into perspective. As we keep relating, for those of you who weren't around,
mm-hmm.
There had been a lot of movies, but if you were a genre film fan, you had very little to actually truly invest time in. And usually something that was on TV that wasn't really much to hang your hat on.
Right.
I think the show that was the closest, and who I think a lot of its initial success was because I think people were expecting this film to either pick up where or create a brand new way of going through their lives of certain characters.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Wow. But when you add in some really good visual effects, of which, outside of Star Wars, I think the show that had the best was Battlestar Galactica.
Yes,
they were the best one, and Lucas ended up suing John Dykstra for basically just packing everything up and going over to Battlestar Galactica for a few years. So.
Yeah, and I have to say, Ardala was one of the villainesses that I had a crush on. I mean, what boy would not have a crush on some dark-haired beauty in spandex? But yeah, let's see here. But the other one, because it was always the evil girls that looked the hottest.
Well, they still do. You have Amber Heard, for example.
Have who?
Amber Heard.
Well, but she played on screen. She played a heroine, you know. So yeah, but I mean, because then the next year we get Flash Gordon in 1980, which you know would be a whole other, you know, because then you know you have Princess Aura.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
compared to Dale Arden, you know.
Well, the thing with the thing you got to understand with that film is there was definitely a lot of sexual innuendo. A lot of stuff got implied. When you read the novelization, it's not really implied. So, but yeah, it was just it is hard to try to do something in a very short amount of time that would have the same kind of cultural impact that Star Wars did.
This is true. Yeah, and I mean, Star Wars really did it brought science fiction into the mainstream. I think Star Wars at that point was what catapulted. It was the seed that became nerddom as we know it, and geekdom.
Yeah.
You know, because up until Star Wars comes out, the only things that you know that I knew in terms of science fiction was 2001 and Star Trek. Now I saw Doctor Who on PBS, you know, and I remember thinking, that was cheesy, but I loved the concept, the idea, but you know, again, that was science fiction in that day. I didn't realize that Tom Baker was the fourth guy to play this guy. You know? To me, Tom Baker was freaking Doctor Who. I did not realize that there had been three. You know, he was standing on the shoulders of three other good actors.
He was one of. I think there were two Doctor Who actors that were actually involved with the Sinbad films in the 1970s.
Oh wow!
Yeah. I shouldn't say two actors. I should say two actors who had both been Doctor Who.
Okay.
Did the Sinbad films.
Mm-hmm.
So Sinbad, the Golden Voyage of Sinbad is one.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is I think that would be it. So those two right there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and speaking of Flash Gordon, just a real quick aside, I actually got to meet Sam Jones a few years ago at a con in Wichita. Down in Wichita. He's a genuinely decent guy. He seems really, you know, he doesn't look much different than he did back in 1980. At least he didn't there. But yeah, I mean, but then again, also, oh God, what is, hang on just a second. Because there's another one. I think it comes out in the 80s. Because I'm remembering the Highlander doesn't come out until 86. But the other thing about Flash Gordon is the soundtrack, all Queen all the time. You cannot go wrong there.
True.
Tom, still have the TARDIS in your attic. Yeah, 11 Alpha. Yeah, I'm just going back and looking at some of the comments. Yeah, a lot of the villainesses had to be hot. It was like in the 70s. In the 70s, it was like the villainess had to be sexy and hot, and the lead romantic interest had to be wholesome and plain. You know, because you get like Lois Lane, you know, in Superman, you know, not, you know, dark-haired, plain-looking, you know, had that kind of irritating, you know, because Margot Kidder had, or she developed for Lois Lane, a kind of abrasive voice. Miss Tessmacher, you know, mostly there for the looks. You know, you've got, you know, Aura in Flash Gordon. You've got Ardala in, you know, in Buck Rogers. You know, which is another place where Star Wars differs in that there is no evil princess. Instead, we get Darth freaking Vader. And David Prowse, I have to hand it to him, as an actor, manages to convey a great deal of, you know, of Vader's personality by movement alone. You know? But the mask was the mask in James Earl Jones's voice. Oh my God. I think Jones's voice just really, really made that, you know what I'm saying? Keith, I'm not hearing anything.
Keith?
No, I'm thinking.
Okay. I was saying, did I disappear?
No. It was definitely me. I mean, wow. Stumping me. Oh, and thank you, Gambit. Thank you for that. I think we talked about that one, though, in the last episode, though. I think we
did. Right. Because we talked about what the remake would have to look like.
Yeah, and that they're considering bringing it back and calling it 2099, which I thought was a stupid idea. It should be just called Moonbase Alpha. But hey,
yeah,
there we go, Real Popcorn Geek. Thank you for pulling my bacon right out of the fire. The Golden Voyage of Sinbad with Tom Baker and Eye of the Tiger with Patrick Troughton. There you go.
And I remember seeing some of those.
Well, you have to know what you're looking for and who you're looking for. Patrick Troughton was the second Doctor. So he's you see him, well, yeah, you know what he looks like. You can pick him out. He's really good at it. But I like all those films. You know, just any one of those movies takes me back. Let's see. And Real Couple, Martin Landau and Barbara Bain. Yeah, it's Bain, no S. Barbara Bain. And their daughter, Julia, or Juliet, I should say. Because Juliet Landau, many of you will know, wound up on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
My beloved Drusilla.
Oh God, yes.
Drusilla. She's got her mom's eyes, you know. And she still does stuff, but she mainly works in Europe. And well, thank you, Anima.
Yeah,
hopefully we're giving you some new stuff to consider, Anima.
Right. See, I remember one of the best Christmas gifts I got was the original G.I. Joe size Luke Skywalkers. His lightsaber looked nothing like the lightsaber in this, you know, because God, that was. Wait a second. I mean, it looked vaguely like, you know, and it had like the little grappling hook and things like that. But yeah, I remember that because I remember the girl down the street just thinking I was, so geeky for that, you know. And now I'm just like, nope, I am I make my living off of similar stuff. Now I get to go to cons and and talk about geeky shit.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I'm gonna put this in. I'm gonna put this in the YouTube chat. This is the one that came out. If you look at the lightsaber on his side, only part of it looks like the original. The original lightsaber.
wow. See, you just hit upon something that caused me to think about the toys of this period. We had started with that last week, but the Battlestar Galactica toys were also pretty decent. And I don't think we ever talked about the Space 1999 toys, which were also really good. I mean, they were very well put together. And in fact, that's become, I would officially like to say that I truly believe that one of the people that has restarted a whole interest and love in the Eagle is Gary, because I hadn't seen too many people display their Eagles. And I start doing Pop Culture Minefield with Gary. He's got his like on his desk or on the wall or something. And now there's people like, oh, I got an Eagle too. And he just, I think he helped to restart a love for the Eagle.
Right.
And again, bringing back anything related to Moonbase Alpha, you're going to have to find a way of reintroducing the Eagle that doesn't stray too far away from its what we would now call its classic look. So
right, because the Eagle, I love that the Eagle basically leaned into the Apollo look.
Mm-hmm.
The Apollo lander look, because it was all angles and tubes and things like that. I remember having that an Eagle as an action toy, because prior to that, before that, my main action figures were the Micronauts.
Oh yeah.
And by comparison, the Star Wars action figures had fewer points of articulation.
Yeah.
And like one accessory, where the Micronauts were like the elbows bent. The original Star Wars had basically 5 points of articulation, 2 legs, 2 arms that basically went, up and down like and the heads turned left and right, and that was about it. And whereas the Micronauts, and some of those were cast metal.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were plastics, but some of them were cast metal. And you could do what you wanted with it. You had Time Traveler, Galactic Ranger, Galactic Defender, a Croyer. I mean, you just had this whole cast you could do anything you wanted with. Star Wars actually gave the action figures a personality. But
the makeup jobs were so advanced. I mean, they were really good with Star Wars, and only got better for every film they released thereafter. Mm-hmm. So you were having. No, go ahead.
Well, and the funny thing is the Cantina scene where we see most of them. A lot of that, some of that was just like, oh, let's put a Wolfman mask on this guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just amazing to see all of this and to remember all of this, because I mean, back again, Fox really got messed with Planet of the Apes. That was not something that ended easy for them.
Right.
But the success of Star Wars just wow.
Yeah. Well, and again, it is what made geekdom and nerddom start to become popular.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't want to admit to it, but they filmed, and that is again because Lucas tapped into something that was universal in storytelling, and that was the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And then of course we get into, which I guess we'd have to go to next time into the 80s, which kicks off with Empire Strikes Back, But prior to this,
Go ahead.
Well, so prior to this, in terms of action figures and storytelling, a lot of kids were left on their own. You had G.I. Joe, you had the various action sets, G.I. Joe does such and such and saves the day, we didn't have a universal lore. And I think that was the important part, is not that it took anything away from the imagination, but there was a lore everybody could share.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that became a uniting figure in fandom at that time, in that everybody could share in that lore. Star Trek had started it, but Star Wars basically made it cool. And because Star Wars, and there's the fandom, Star Trek versus Star Wars, and those two are fundamentally different. Star Wars is about opposing oppression. Star Wars is the fight against the Empire. You take the Empire out of it, and Star Wars changes. Which is why every iteration of Star Wars after that still has its own version of the Empire. Every prequel of that has its own version of the Empire. Star Wars is basically about the struggle. It's about the rebellion. It's the rebellion story. Star Trek, on the other hand, is about the future. It's a hopeful story, which Next Gen, I think, encapsulated quite nicely with with Patrick Stewart. It's like the Federation does not use currency. And then they introduce the Ferengi. And suddenly gold press latinum becomes a thing, and it's, yes, it did. That's exactly a Gambit. Personality, charisma, and ferociousness. I mean, freaking Han Solo, who didn't want to be Han Solo? If they could have turned Han Solo into a Jedi, there would be no room for any other hero ever again. But Real Pop Geek, I agree. I hope so. If they're going to do another Highlander, he would be a good choice. But Star Wars, Star Trek was about a hopeful future, whereas Star Wars was, fighting oppression, fighting the Empire, fighting the good fight. Evil capitals Ferengi. Yes, 11 Alpha. Until Quark comes along. Until Quark comes along, which, who completely and completely rewrites Ferengi. Played by Armin Shimmerman, who is a brilliant actor. My first exposure to him was in the Beauty and the Beast series, when he played Pascal.
Well,
is that a deep cut or what?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is the seeds for where we are today. Where we're on a podcast, on a Thursday morning, talking for 2 hours about
nerddom of our youth.
Yeah, exactly.
Our youth.
Well, and here's the thing. Next weekend, I'm going to be going to Cape Girardeau for a con.
Wow.
That's my job. Weekend before last, I was at freaking, I was at Tremendacon, and last weekend I was at a writer conference, and in the 70s, I could not have, unless I wrote for a TV show, I could not have conceived of doing this for a living. My parents could not conceive of me being a writer for a living. You know, Real Popcorn Geek, I'm with you on that. I have faith in the Highlander reboot, as long as Henry Cavill's with it.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. God. You know, I mean, Keith, you've been doing podcasts like this for how long? Because you've been doing it for a long time, even after, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
All I can say is this. I've said it before, and I'm going to keep saying it until it gets through. You know, the 70s was a really different time. The 70s was, it could have all been, you know, oh, wait a minute, 11 Alpha, the dystopian elements did start in TNG. Yeah, look, there was a lot of dystopian stuff, especially at the beginning of the 1970s. But as soon as Star Wars hit, that even changed that. You know, we went back to trying to make films, especially science fiction action films for a lot of these film studios, came back negative. So,
well, and the thing about there could be only one. He'll still be Connor McLeod. The dystopian elements started in Next Gen, but I think the thing about that was they stood out so much because of the otherwise utopian approach Roddenberry had. You know, because the one thing that you could not do with Next Gen was have interpersonal conflicts between main characters.
Yes.
You could not do that. There was no, you know, you were not going to be having interpersonal conflict between Picard and you know, and Riker, you know, or anything like that. And the you know, there was barely, you know, even any disciplinary action. Now there were things where, you know, characters were disciplined, but it was one time and done.
Well, that's because what changed, what really changed. Maybe we should like hold off on having this deep discussion about this until we get to the 80s. But I will say this. What truly changed for the Next Generation writing staff was when Michael Piller got hired, because he had cracked the code on how to do it. Up until that point, the writer's room was a place of chaos. And the first two seasons, they had seen so many people hired and fired that I think it even made the Guinness Book of World Records how many people that they had up until another program came along and beat them for that record. But Michael Piller gets hired, and suddenly everything changes, and everything starts to work. You know, Next Generation was already popular. It had numbers. But the critics and many fans didn't like the quality of what was being written. They didn't like the quality of the scripts and many of the plots.
Yeah. And Next Gen didn't really hit its stride in that first season.
Yeah. So it again, I think. Yeah. Anyway.
I got you.
It's just I want to make more of it, but I mean I can't, because that's good content for when we get into the 80s.
Yeah.
But because we're still in the 70s, next week's show and from here on to the end of this month, we'll just be talking about a lot of, you know, we're going to go back over a few things we may have missed, but for the most part, we're just going to talk in total 70s pop culture. We're going to get more into a lot of the products that were put out, a lot of the comic strips. We're going to talk more about the comic book industry during this period. because there's a lot to be said for what happened in the 70s. And I'm telling you right now, what a lot of people know of the comic industry now was because of what happened in the 70s, or in this case, what happened in 1975. 1975 was when Warner Brothers bought out DC Comics. And they did it because DC was more successful and had IP that more people were familiar with that were not or non-comic book people at that point. Non-comic book fans. A lot of the general public would know these characters. Look, everybody still knows Superman and Batman. And Wonder Woman. But mainly Superman and Batman. They know these characters. They can describe how they look. They might even really, it's just, DC was just it at that point.
Yeah.
And Warner Brothers comes along, buys them up. Now, it's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's good because now DC is solidified or guaranteed its future with a major corporation like that. And now they can take this, they can now do something that they had only dreamed of in the past, which is have access to all of the goods and services and resources, legal and otherwise, to be able to work with Warner Brothers to put a lot of merchandise and other things out, especially for turning ideas and IPs into movies and or television shows. Yeah, we'll save that part of the talk for anyway.
Yeah, I hear that. But yeah, I mean,
I can just keep going on and on and on about the 70s and about how important it was, but I think we hit a lot of the highlights. But let me at least just try to end it all by saying this. For those of you, as I started all this, for those of you who weren't born during this time, really, I would like to think that Ben and I and even Martin have hit a lot of the really cool highlights and high points of what you can expect. And hopefully with the next two shows that we do, we'll be able to fill in more of that for a lot of you. But what you're really going to have to do is experience it for yourself. What I mean by that, I'm not talking about a time machine. I mean going out to your local comic book dealer, so you can get your hands on, either collect works of a particular time period, whether it's DC or Marvel from the 1970s. See if you can find. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I mean, Star Wars had a very good comic run in the 70s.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Newspaper comic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, there's all kinds of stuff that came out. Of course, also that was when Splinter of the Mind's Eye came out, which was
yeah. Well, both Star Wars and eventually Star Trek. Star Trek ended up launching a new comic strip, I think, in the 70s, late 70s, because of the success of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Over the interest that they had.
Yeah.
And they had the DC Comics got the rights to the comics in the 80s. But in the 1970s, they ended up having a newspaper comic strip based on the adventures of the Enterprise crew after the events of Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah, because we don't see Wrath of Khan until 82.
Yeah. So that goes out to a lot of newspapers. So I mean, I was one of those kids who was just like, yeah, let's see what else they're doing.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, at the end of the movie, it's kind of convenient that the two brand new characters they were introducing are both gone, and now it's the original Enterprise crew anyway on the bridge. Well, let's go. You know,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just there's just so much, and television shows and music. I mean, everything. There are a lot of nerds involved in other disciplines that people who are just proud of showing their nerddom. Read by nature. Hello. Of course, you know, you have Led Zeppelin. You could tell a very well-read group of nerds, you know.
Right.
And it is nice when the non-traditional areas of entertainment can chime in and or, you know, talk about or show their nerddom. You know, whether it's the Beatles in the movie Help, where Paul McCartney is playing on the organ, and instead of sheets of music, they have all these Jimmy Olsen comic books sitting right there. And McCartney was he was a comic book guy. He was a comic book guy, but I think he was more of a Marvel guy. You know, he did like his DC, but I think he was more of a Marvel guy. And I think you can Google a picture of Paul McCartney backstage at one of his concerts with Jack Kirby. So, big Jack Kirby fan. But then again, who, with any common sense, who out there isn't a Jack Kirby fan, considering many of the things Jack Kirby was doing on the side outside of Marvel and DC.
Right.
But, you know. I just, I hope we can continue to communicate a lot of that. Read by Nature. Highlander series was such fun as a kid. Rush Adultery episodes were surprisingly good.
Right. So one thing I want to end on with, because this was for me something that became inspirational later in life. 1979 also sees a rebel enter the scene by the name of Mike Jitlov. Are you familiar with this name, Keith?
Repeat that again.
So 1979 also sees a short film by a rebel by the name of Mike Jitlov.
Mike Jitlov. I want to.
Yes. Okay, let me make it easier. Let me make it easier for you. Wizard of Speed and Time.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Basically, Mike Jitlov is a stop motion special effects artist who created a short film called The Wizard of Speed and Time. And I remember first seeing it at a school assembly. Some basically motivational speaker group had this whole thing. It's also where I started. Yeah, it was amazing. This was my hero because Jitlov did everything on his own. He was one of the first indies to me that actually had an impact on me. And later on, he actually turned it into a feature film in '88. But the originals, Wizard of Speed and Time, was just Mike Jitlove going, look what you can do.
Yeah. Well, that along with the year after Star Wars came out was the parody classic Hardware Wars.
Hardware Wars, yes. And bear in mind, this is before the internet was even a thing.
Yeah. Bambi versus Godzilla was another classic.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, you're bringing back all these memories.
Right? Yeah. Fluke Starbucker, Chewchilla the Wookiee monster, and Ham Salad, and Augie Bendaki. I mean, just those names. It was everything 100% a parody.
Wow.
Right?
Oh, geez. And of course, nowadays, Batman Dead End and Troops being two that are just absolute classics.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and these are things that the only thing that they were on was like, I mean, Wizard of Speed and Time was on 16 millimeter film.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you had to really be lucky enough to either go to some sort of a film festival or be lucky at a convention.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, when they still had film rooms at conventions, remember those kids? And
yeah. And evidently, speaking of Hardware Wars, evidently Lucas actually enjoyed it, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, they did get sued, but Lucas did enjoy it. So
yeah,
he may have enjoyed it. Didn't stop him from sending out the lawyers.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I remember film rooms. God, I remember film rooms at Vision Con.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you could just show films, and you know, lawyers from Disney wouldn't show up and take everything from you, including your birthday.
Yeah. Anyway, let me just wrap this up and just say this. It is a pleasure to do this with you, both you guys, really, because it's a lot of fun to be able to remember this stuff. But it's also great because, you know, you guys can always check me on some of this stuff to make sure, you know, to be able to show some of our audience, especially our younger audience, that I'm not completely crazy when I say stuff like, well, you know, they actually had this in a movie.
Right.
You know, I mean, again, I know it's easy to rake some of what we did in the 70s and over the coals. And you know what? Even I'm still making fun of us for the whole pet rock thing, because I still can't believe there were a majority of people in their right minds thinking, well, that's a neat idea.
Right.
It's a rock, people. A rock.
Speaking of rocks, we have Tree Rock Creation.
Hey, Tree Rock Creations. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Yeah, we did talk about that earlier.
Yeah. And again, good show. It's a good show. For those that didn't pay attention so much, check out on YouTube Battlestar Galactica: The Second Coming. There you go. That's from me to you. Anyway, I'd like to thank Tree Rock Creations, Read by Nature, 11 Alpha, Parrot Head, Patrick Jordan, Tom Baker, Christopher Moonlight. Geez, dude, I really don't see you a lot anymore, and it's great to hear from you. Real Popcorn Geek. Anima, that's the amazing thing. She asked, Crazy Professor Keith, Where do I sign up for class? Well, you know what? You're doing it right now.
You're in class right now.
You are in class right now. And just remember, I will consider not throwing in a test at the end of all of this at the end of the month. Heck, I might even be real cruel and just do an overall test for the entire course in August. So
I mean, there may be pop quizzes.
there may be pop quizzes. See? Look what happens. Look what happens.
Next time,
Professor
Andy,
Reed put it out there. He's willing it into existence.
if Andy gives more memberships, we could just do pop quizzes, see who gets the first answer.
Well, thank you, Real Popcorn Geek. Gambit, 1987. Mrs. A, the incredible Anima Confusa. And Moro, because he's cool like that. And let me just say, I want to thank all of you out there, because if not for you listening to this, I don't think it'd be even half as fun. Of course, I'd probably get roasted a lot more by various people, but when's that ever really different, you know? Anyway, join us please next week. We are going to continue on with Camp Keith. We're going to try to make this a well-rounded discussion of the 1970s. Just wrapping up with a few additional things that we didn't get to the previous time, but that pretty much takes care of the 1970s from us. So, yeah, you. And let me just say, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. You could check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, pretty much anywhere, any place where, you know, there's social media outlets. You might find us. You never know.
Or inlets.
We would still be doing the whole smoke signals thing, but
Right.
lighting the fires of Gondor. No. Anyway, oh, wow. Anyway, on behalf of myself and Martin, and of course, Ben Reeder, this has been Morning Coffee with Keith. I need to get us out of here so Ben can do his coffee. And I hope to see everybody back here next Thursday. Have a good day, everybody.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.